was just turning towards each other. And our intention is to deepen in intimacy, pleasure, and connection. So it's not goal-oriented about having sex or orgasms. It was deepening in intimacy, connection, and pleasure. And after a few weeks, it was unbelievable, like the psychic space and emotional relief that I felt in my body and in my life that I had been carrying around and that had built up for over a decade.
By having a commitment to really be intimate with each other every week, it brings us both face to face with whatever those things are. Like whatever crud was left over from that time will sometimes come to the surface, but it's there for us to deal with together in this intimate setting. It's very powerful.
Hello and welcome to Married and Magnetic, the place for entrepreneurial couples who want to stay happily married.
In each episode, we have real conversations with ordinary couples doing extraordinary things, sharing achievements, everyday joys, challenges, and the mindset and tools that make love the greatest strategic edge.
We are James
and Angela Mitchell,
a real-life married couple. She's a counselor,
and he's a coach,
parents to 3 kids,
and co-founders of Love Intentionally. We've ridden the highs
and lows
of building businesses while working hard to stay happily married. We've lived it, done the work,
got the t-shirt,
and are here to help you do the same.
This is Married and Magnetic, where love, business, and growth collide. Let's dive in, y'all. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another amazing episode of Married and Magnetic, a Love Intentionally podcast. We're so excited to have our guests, Elana and Bill, today. And if you're listening to the show and you find yourself in that position in your lifelong marriage where things might have gone a little flat, what once had a lot of passion has kind of turned into that dreaded roommate phase. You find yourself a little bit stuck there looking to bring the aliveness back, the passion back, and the intimacy back, then this is the conversation for you. And before we dive in, we'll give you a little bit of a bio here so you can understand about where they're coming from and how they got to this space. Elana is a lover, mother, author, mentor, activator, and priestess. While Elana has a wealth of professional experience guiding people deeper into their bodies and their pleasure, the sure thing comes directly from her personal life. After years of frustration and failed gimmicks to try to respark the passion in her 20-year marriage, Elana created the sure thing. She wrote this book because she wants everyone to have access to this life-altering practice. And her husband, Bill, is with us, and this is his first podcast, and they're first to do together, and we're excited. He is the anchor in their preneurship with a job in software, and so we're excited to get him here to share his perspective on this and for them to share their love and their hearts with you. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
What a delight to be with you.
Thanks. Yeah, I was saying before we started, James and I are particularly excited about this because as our listeners may know, intimacy is one of the areas we love to talk about. It was our own Achilles heel at one point in our relationship. And so we did a lot of work in that area and then found the tools that really did what Elana's talking about of kind of bringing that spark back and that aliveness back and that connection back. And now that's one of the things we love to help other couples do and share. So we are personally and professionally excited for this conversation. So we're just going to dive in because this topic's so much juiciness. So I know, Elana, the book you wrote has a lot of basis in your own personal lived experience in your relationship. So can you all share with us kind of what was that arc of intimacy for you as a couple?
Do you want me to start?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I want to give you the option because, but okay. Well, like many couples, we met and, when our eyes met, I actually recognized him. He didn't recognize me yet, but I did recognize him as like someone who I was kind of fated, it seemed like, to meet and to be with. And we had a really passionate chemistry, pheromones, flaming. We actually began our relationship as research partners, researching orgasm, mostly my orgasm. And so it was super hot and heavy and satisfying and sexual and wild and wonderful. Years go by, we get married, we have a child, we have responsibilities, and soon enough, the sex life, the attention to our passion and tending that flame between us really took a way back seat. And so we tried lots of different things. We tried sexpert advice. We read books. We tried things that friends of ours were trying as well, and nothing worked. And so it was a 12-year struggle, really. And like most couples, there was a built up gunk, I call it, resentments and abandonment and rejection and hurt feelings. And so, there was this distance that just keeps growing between us. And then there's like a part of me that I came up with this idea in 2018, but there was a part that felt so rejected that I was like, well, no, I'm not going to do it because he doesn't deserve it. But then I'm hurting myself, right? Just this childish stuff was there. And finally, in December 2020, I committed to a friend that I was going to ask Bill to do this weekly pleasure practice with me. I had no idea if he was going to even say yes. And I had no idea if what was going to happen. But I figured we might as well try it because we've tried everything and nothing has worked. And I really want that depth of connection that we have, and we always loved each other, but I wanted that sexual pleasure connection, right? And exploration again with my beloved. And so I asked him, he said, sure, baby. And then we started this weekly practice. At the time, our kid had a drum lesson on Saturday mornings. And so that was our time when it was just turning towards each other. And our intention is to deepen in intimacy, pleasure, and connection. So it's not goal oriented about having sex or orgasms, however that often happens, was deepening in intimacy, connection, and pleasure. And after a few weeks, it was unbelievable, like the psychic space and emotional relief that I felt in my body and in my life that I had been carrying around and that had built up for over a decade. And now, like, new parts of myself, and I can go on, but I'm going to let you say a little something, honey.
I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking when we first started seeing each other, a lot of our time together was spent with my attention on Ilana's orgasm. Full stop. And as we started making a life together and building a home, having a kid, continuing to deepen in our relationship with our daughter, that attention became less focused on Ilana and more focused on all the things happening in life. And that shift in our dynamic where, I wasn't having my attention on her orgasm and her pleasure, it was a real change. And it got very frustrating for Ilana to where when I would make advances, sometimes she would say no because she was angry about not having been paid attention to. And so it became this vicious cycle that kind of spiraled us down, I would say, in terms of intimacy. When she proposed the sure thing, for me, it was like, yes, like absolutely. It was an instant, clear yes for me because I knew we needed it. Like I knew we needed to try something different. And what I found is that by having a commitment to really be intimate with each other every week, it brings us both face to face with whatever those things are. Like whatever crud was left over from that time will sometimes come to the surface, but it's there for us to deal with together in this intimate setting. It's very powerful.
I love that. Elana, it sounds like you were the one who brought the idea to Bill. How, I think there's probably lots of ways this could be a long answer, but what did you notice about how did the lack of intimacy, and particularly sexual intimacy in your relationship, how did it affect the other areas of your life and relationship? Like, what were you noticing that I'm guessing was part of like, we need to fix this part because it's affecting these other parts?
I'm remembering back because it's been 5.5 years now that we've had this weekly practice, which is just remarkable. I cannot. Okay, but before it was affecting our whole relationship because I'll give you an example. I had a tone that I rarely use anymore, right? I mean,
No, you
it's
don't.
very
You
rare.
don't.
But I had this tone that said, basically, the tone was, you fucking idiot, without actually saying you fucking idiot, like a total bitchy tone that I would use all the time. with Bill, not with our kids, you know, but just with you, sweetheart. And at one point, we're standing in the mirror, in the mirror in our bathroom, you know, doing our ablutions before bed or something. And I was using the tone, and he just looked me in the eye and said, "You're being a biatch." And that like broke the spell. Like as soon as he said that, I was like, wow, you're right. And it felt horrible using that tone. Like, you know, it made me feel really contracted and brittle and angry and enraged, really. And it didn't feel good. And it didn't feel good to hurt him with the tone. So that was like a little crack in this years long struggle where, okay, we have a little relief. Now we have a way for him to call me out when I'm being the biatch. And as soon as he would say that, it would just dissolve. But those kinds of things were like in our everyday.
Yeah. I mean, I'll add for me, even just, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, I was sharing things with Elana about how I was feeling and what was going on with my like inner life. And sometimes I can kind of keep my own counsel. Like if I'm going through a lot of emotions, I don't want to necessarily make it somebody else's problem. And so I'll just kind of work through it quietly on my own. And I was sharing with her a lot of what was going on with me. And I don't remember if Ilana noticed it or if I noticed it, but one of us was like, you know, I think maybe it was
I
me.
asked you. No, I asked you. How come now you're sharing?
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. Right. Because I think I noticed that I was sharing more. And Ilana was like, well, why are you sharing more now? And I was like, just a sure thing. Like it can't help when we're making a point of spending like really unguarded, intimate time together every week. It can't help but change how we feel. It can't help but change how I feel. Like for me, sex and intimacy and emotions and vulnerability, I mean, they're all bound up together. So, you know, when we're not spending time being intimate with each other, and being sexual with each other, then it's easy for me to have that guard kind of start to shell over a little bit.
Yeah. We talk about the different intimacy styles when we work with couples, you know, and some people have a bigger bucket for emotional intimacy and some for sexual and some for intellectual, right? They're all the different types. And what we've really seen in our own life and the couples we've worked with, that if we start filling one bucket, the other ones kind of naturally get filled some too, right? So if we start exploring sexual intimacy more, then that's also filling our experiential intimacy bucket and it's filling our emotional intimacy bucket, right? They have a way of kind of like all rising together, even if you're mainly focusing on one at the time.
It sounds like this was diving into your emotional intimacy bucket, like being willing to be vulnerable and not carry everything by yourself anymore. And also trusting that she could hold that. Because is there a
Exactly.
reason you were holding it before other than like it wasn't necessarily your primary style?
Yeah, it just happened in conditioning.
Yeah.
There was no big there was no big resentment I was carrying that was like, oh, I'm not going to share this with her. I think it was more just, yeah, habit and conditioning.
I'm meant to carry this one alone. I can shoulder this one.
Mhm.
Classic man training right there.
Uh,
So, in terms of you mentioned the sure thing, right? And so let's just dive in and give a little picture as to what this is. What is the sure thing experiment?
Well, the sure thing experiment really asks the question, can a weekly pleasure practice change the world? Because it changed my world. It changes our world every week. And so, you know, I started wondering last summer before the book came out, a friend of mine said, well, I wonder if there's a bigger project around this book. And so was the bigger, it's like, how many practitioners will it take to really start to see tangible changes in our lives, in our communities, in our cities, countries, world, even, right? So, and it starts with having a weekly practice, which can be done solo or can be done with a partner or with as many consenting adults as you wish. And why I say weekly, sure, you could have it more than weekly, but having it minimum weekly practice, it just begins to become this habit where we have access to opening to the more subtle realms. Our bodies are these incredibly highly tuned, instruments of sensation and sensual experience. And so, how are we going to be able to feel the more subtle end of the spectrum if we're not practicing regularly, right? To open our awareness and open our senses in these ways. And so, the sure thing is a commitment to yourself and to a partner to have a weekly exploration. And it begins with setting an intention. And as I mentioned, our intention continues to be deepening in intimacy, pleasure, and connection. Your intention can be anything that turns you on, that you want in your sensual sexual life for yourself, in your partnership. And so every week you schedule it, you have a time, you put it in your calendar, you get it, in there, and it doesn't have to happen whenever it happens. Ours is generally on Saturdays. And that's the time where you put away the devices and you turn towards each other, right? In the book, whoops, no picture. In the book, here's the book. So in the book, there's a lot of guidance and exercises and suggestions of how to prepare. So you can prepare for your sure thing, discovering that what gets you personally into your body, what softens you, what has you open and want to receive intimate connection. Now, you could do one of those practices to get ready for a sure thing, or that could be part of your sure thing. It's completely customizable. So it's the time is coming, and maybe for me, I love soaking in hot water. So I may get in the bath. I may turn on our sure thing playlist and start to dance, and then invite Bill into the room. We may just, be feeling really low energy and tired, and we just lie on the bed and hold hands. Or we sit and we eye gaze, or we dance together, or we take a bath together, or it's really infinite. And often a question that we use during our sure thing, which is kind of like a focal point where you can keep coming back to this question, is what would be most pleasurable right now? And so if I'm practicing with myself, then I would tune in and listen, okay, what would be most pleasurable right now? And then I would lovingly give that to myself, right? And then if we're practicing together, then one of us would ask the other. And of course, you always have choice, right? So like with any request, you can say yes, you can say no, and you can counteroffer. And so that is kind of like a guiding question throughout our sure thing, because, you at some point, I might be feeling less sensation and this isn't as pleasurable as it had been like 5 minutes ago. So, okay, well, I asked myself, what would be most pleasurable right now? Or I'd ask Bill. And so that's the practice. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, at the core, I love this idea of what would be most pleasurable. I mean, how often do we get to ask ourselves or our person that question, and do it in a safe container? One of the things that kind of resonated, Bill, you were saying in the early days, I was completely focused on orgasm, full stop. That's super common, and right. So I'm hearing this, and I'm just
Or
curious.
sometimes uncommon. It depends on the, the man and the couple.
Yeah, focused on. Okay, all right, that's fair. I think
The
we're
good
great.
folk we know, the men folk in our lives tend to
Like, and I think
enjoy that.
what is common is people are usually better at giving than receiving. That is, whenever we play that 3-minute game or the We Love Consent game from Dr. Betty Martin, the idea is we'll ask people what role felt the most challenging to you. And usually it's receiving, asking for what I want and then receiving it. And so inside this pleasure practice that you do, Bill, do you still approach it? Like, is this one of those things where you're generally asking Elana, like, what would be most pleasurable right now? And you find yourself more in the giving role? Is that something that you intentionally take turns with? How does that play out?
I think with what we're doing, it doesn't really have the same flavor as what it used to have. I would say it's not, it doesn't really feel asymmetric. It kind of feels like more of an open space where it's just exploration. And so sometimes the attention is on her, sometimes the attention is on me, and it flows pretty freely. So that's different from the beginning. In the beginning, it was really very me focused on her orgasm. And now when we have sure things, it's really what will it take to open to, what will it take to open? What will it take to open? That's really it. I mean, when Ilana was describing what the sure thing is, as she was answering, I had my own answer, which was, for me, the sure thing is really a commitment to set a time where you spend time with each other, and the time you're spending with each other is completely giving over to this intention. That's it. And then what that can look like, it'll vary, like day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute. Like it just kind of unfolds in a very organic way. But you're holding an intention together, and you've made a commitment to give yourselves over to this intention.
Honey, when you were talking, I remembered about maybe a year or so into us practicing the sure thing. I asked you, if you'd like me to ask you the question. And how come it's always focused on me? Because it was. I mean, this is great, James. You're totally tuning in, because it was at the beginning mostly focused on my pleasure, and he would be asking me that question.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember what you responded?
No.
You said, well, I thought that's what you wanted.
There you go.
And it was what I wanted, but that was before the sure thing, when I was like dry and, like just desperate for, sensual connection and touch and intimate and emotional connection with him. And Bill had the courage to tell me that. And then I could clarify, well, no, that's changed. I'm feeling full and juicy and open and overflowing thanks to this practice. And so I want you to explore what it is that you want too. What would be most pleasurable for you? Because that's fun. The more we are both open and curious, the more creativity can open up, and we, find new terrain. And that's the other really remarkable thing, as I'm sure you both know, that the realm of pleasure and orgasm is infinite. And so there are no bounds other than our imagination, right? So, when we're both asking this question of ourselves and of each other, it really just opens the field for even more magic and pleasure to arise.
Yeah. I love the evolution of this, because I think it's really common and also really exciting about long-term relationships. I'm going to use a food analogy maybe because it's lunchtime where I'm at right now, but it's like when you're starving, like you were talking about, Alana, you just wanted some sensual sexual touch. It's kind of like anything will do. Like, just give me some crackers, right? I'll take that.
Like the airplane snacks.
Yeah. And then, but when you're satiated, then it's like, oh, what do we want for dinner? Which of the 10 restaurants in town do we want to go to, right? And so there's just all this more that becomes available when we're already coming from a place of satiation, right, and fullness. And then a couple other things I also heard that have evolved is, yes, the focus on her orgasm, but also the focus on orgasm, period, right? That is very typical, I think, in younger folks as they're, engaging in sex, is that's the goal, right? Is orgasm.
That's
ideally,
how we know we did a good job.
Ideally, you both get one, right? That's kind of like the fair way to do it. Yeah. And then as you get older and as the relationship evolves, I think there just again, more becomes available. And when that's not the goal, it can be a nice, icing on the cake. But when it's not the goal, you actually get to slow down and enjoy the whole experience. Or sometimes bodies just aren't feeling an orgasm that day, and that's okay. You can still have a connective, intimate, sensual, sexual experience and it be fulfilling even without that end goal. And I think that's an evolution I see in relationships that really put the effort into this. And then the third thing I would say is you all talking about just setting aside the time, you're able to bring your full presence to it as well, which again, I also think enhances the actual experience and the journey, not just the destination of it, is just having that time blocked out in the calendar where you can bring your full presence to each other into that moment. So what would you say? We recommend scheduling intimacy. We schedule our own once a week. Ours is not on the same time every day. We have a weekly marriage meeting every Sunday, and at that meeting, we schedule our intimacy for the week. So we look at the calendar, and based on kids' activities and work schedules, we pick a time. But we do schedule one session a week like you all are doing, and we recommend it to our clients. And sometimes we get resistance around not wanting to schedule it.
I want it to be
Yeah.
spontaneous.
So what would you say to that idea that scheduling it makes it not as enjoyable or spontaneous or whatever?
Well, I'd say several things to that. First of all, when you were talking, Angela, I was thinking that, the scheduling it. I don't know if y'all experience this, but I certainly do. I get turned on, and I could maybe whisper in his ear like, "Sure thing's coming up tomorrow," or if it's the morning of and we're in the kitchen, and it just it there's more flirtation and there's like this buildup around that this is going to happen, right? Right. So instead of thinking it's going to arise spontaneously. And a few months into us practicing the sure thing, I learned about, which you all know all about, spontaneous desire and responsive desire. And so I had thought that really it was all about spontaneous desire because that's what we're conditioned in this culture from Hollywood movies and otherwise, and from our experience at the beginning of a relationship, is that this is just supposed to well up naturally to want to, lust after someone, and then that will then result in some kind of sexual connection or activity,
And if
right?
that doesn't happen, there's some kind of problem.
Right. Exactly. If it doesn't happen, there's some kind of problem where actually, no. The majority of women and people in general, especially in longer term relationships, have responsive desire, which the desire that responds to the context and with somebody who you feel safe with and who you love. And so for me, once I learned about responsive desire, because sometimes when I wasn't in the mood, when it was a time for a sure thing and I was just like, oh, okay, the effort, it's like, once I learned about responsive desire, even though I had experienced it so many times, but just having the language and knowing the concept, it's like, okay, baby, let's just go. I'm really tired. Let's just go lie on the bed together and see, and maybe start with the massage. Maybe start with just playing with my hair, or let me just kiss your cheek. Just something that's like that will open. Let's just hold each other. Let's just hold hands. Let's just hug and see what happens. And inevitably, one of us will begin to have some responsive desire and then make a request.
I've learned, I think that the idea of spontaneous desire almost isn't even real. Like it's not spontaneous because I think women look at men and go, they have a more spontaneous desire. But one, we're typically, especially in the younger days, we're thinking about sex all the time.
You're
And
responding to your
we're
own thoughts.
responding to our own thoughts. And then as we get older, when that starts to wane, they'll look at porn, right? Men will look at porn as a way to get turned on. And then at the first stages of that, they'll be like, okay, now I'm turned on. Let me bring it to the lady. And she's like, oh, he's so spontaneous in his desire. We're like, no, he's just been looking at porn all day. And then at some point, that starts to have a backlash effect where it's like, oh, I need to like amplify the intensity of what I'm looking at in order to get turned on. And then so all of a sudden, our lifelong partner isn't able to like even hold our desire anymore. And that's one of the biggest detriments, I think, for men that do or anybody that does engage in looking at porn. It starts to really make it harder to connect
In the real life. Yeah.
in the real life.
Yeah. And Elana, I was like you when I learned about responsive desire. I found it so empowering, because it was like,
Me too.
yeah.
It's like, oh, now I
Too.
have a
Yeah.
playbook for how to get this freaking oven going.
Yeah. But I think what can happen is we can just think that, getting older and the responsibilities of life and everything, like my sex drive is just gone or my libido is down, right? And it almost feels like a personal failure or like something wrong with our bodies, or maybe it's our hormones that are off or all of these things. And when we realize that it's actually a natural process, both in aging as humans, but also aging in a relationship, that, early in the relationship, we're going off of that spontaneous and dopamine is released because it's new and novel. And so our brain is able to do that. When things no longer are novel, the dopamine doesn't, kick in as much, but the oxytocin does, which is the bonding, which is what you want in a longer term relationship because it feels more safe and secure and stable and less chaotic than those bursts of dopamine hits, right? So it's actually a good thing, but it just means our desire changes, right? And we need to approach it differently. So what worked earlier in the relationship just doesn't work the same now. We need new strategies, right? And so when I learned that, it was like, I don't have to just wait until desire pops up right in front of me and then try to go find him because that's
Yes.
probably not going to be the right
Right.
time or, yeah, or as much as he wants either. But that, I can actually just open up the setting and the context and see how my body responds. And like 9 times out of 10, we do end up having sex after I've just opened myself to responsiveness. And not always, like you said, consent is always a thing. And it can just be, let's just lay here and cuddle or give each other a back massage. But yeah, I found it very empowering that there are actually things I can do to help make myself available to and build desire within myself.
Now, great comedian from the Bay Area, Robin Williams, rest in peace. He had a joke that said, he's like, I don't really care about gay marriage because after you've been together long enough, it's all same sex. And so, story in my head is that one of you is more creative or is bringing a little bit more of that creativity, probably on average. And so you're scheduling these events, and over time, it's also like you might find some maybe ruts or stuckness. Does one of you identify as more creative in bringing ideas to that space?
Do you want to guess?
I'm going to guess Alana.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. During practicing the sure thing, this part of myself, I alluded to her. I call her vivacious Viv, my wild sensual self, which I attest that each of us has a wild sensual self inside. And what happened with the sure thing was, yes, I knew her. I recognized her from, brief encounters from my 20s and 30s, but I didn't really embody her until we started the sure thing. And then every week was like this canvas of our bedroom. And she would come out with all of these fantasies and requests and things that I didn't even know that I wanted until here it is coming out of my mouth. And okay, baby, let's try that. Why not? Let's see how it feels. And the thing, to the joke, Robin Williams of blessed memory, if we are, and this is what I spoke of at the beginning of having a regular practice really opens up those subtle channels. So we're more aware of sensation of what's happening in our body, because there's no way that we can be awake to all of the millions of input that's coming in, through our skin, through our senses in any one moment, right? However, as we practice more, we get more skilled at being able to feel them and recognize them. And so, even if you're having sex in the same position that you've done 500 times with this person, as we open that awareness, our sensual, sensate awareness through a regular practice like this, it can't be the same because we are feeling different things. There's the windows open now. So now I'm feeling this really ecstatic breeze on my face as he's plunging into wherever he's plunging. So that's really, I find so fascinating, and also why I call it a love laboratory, because we're experimenting, and it's the sure thing experiment because it is. We're in a laboratory, and even if we're doing the exact same thing with the same person, it can't be the same because of all of the different things that are arising in that moment. So as we open up that channel of awareness to all the millions of sensations in our bodies in any one moment, and as well as thoughts and feelings, that then adds so many layers of vibrancy and differentiation to any experience.
Yeah, we had
Mhm.
a couple we worked with. They were both shapeshifters on the erotic blueprint, right? And they're like, but we don't have the ideas. And it feels like,
Because they were like, we're like both open to anything. So when we get in the space, we're like, what do you want to do? I don't know. I'll do anything. What do you want to do? Yeah.
And I think that there's also going to be a level of trust, safety, and then communication, and willingness to be vulnerable to say the thing that you're wanting to try and experience. And so I think people have a lot more creativity than they give themselves credit for. It's just that block between their head, their heart, and getting it out of their mouth. And
Yeah.
then some couples they'll say mismatched libidos, right? What would you say to that couple?
Say that that's a real thing, and that's okay. I mean, it's okay. Different people, and because the spectrum of sexual appetite is wide of the normal spectrum, normal, right? So I think that just because somebody has more sexual appetite doesn't mean that and you're maybe the higher desire person in the partnership. That doesn't mean your partner can't meet you or won't meet you, won't find you there, right? If we're open and there's no requirement. There's just an invitation.
Bill, it seems like if she's got more creativity, she might also, in some regards, maybe have the higher libido. Is that fair to
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, for sure.
And how have you managed that as the husband?
Well, when Ilana was just talking about having different libidos, I was thinking it's not really, you can show up in the sure thing in wherever you are. You can feel however you feel. And it's about intimacy and letting unfold whatever unfolds. And so sometimes I find that my libido unlocks responsively through the experience. And sometimes I find that maybe my body and libido are just feeling quiet today and I just put my attention on her. It's just about being present and making space for whatever's there, including her libido, even if mine doesn't feel very strong in any given moment.
It's very loving.
Yeah. I would
No.
say also that's, yeah.
Take a moment to appreciate that one.
I would say for me, that's also where scheduling actually helps because part of what would kill my libido was the to-do list, or maybe I was tired, or, all of that. And so when it's on the calendar, I make the space for it. I know it's coming. I might have a midday cup of coffee if we're doing it at night that night. I can prepare.
Might have a martini if we're trying to get it. Like,
Some of
Whatever.
his more creative ideas. Yeah. But I can I can kind of clear my calendar, my schedule, and mentally prepare for it as well. Maybe I take a shower or bath, right? All those things, but scheduling it actually gives me the space to then show up for it versus if he just, I'm in the middle of something in the kitchen and he comes up behind me and is like, "Hey, baby," I'm usually not in the mood right then. I'm like, "Well, I'm
Wow.
right." Yeah. It doesn't work. So I do find scheduling helps, at least for me, with getting ready. So
With your book, I feel like we've gotten to hear a lot of the. Oh, go ahead. You got one.
I just wanted to circle back to something that you said, James, which I mentioned in the book, the elephant in the bedroom, which is shame, right? And so shame, because it's just in the air that we breathe, in the culture that we live in. I call it the puritanical patriarchal society. And I unpack all that in the book. And shame is weaponized against us so that we stay small and silent. And this is whatever gender you are. This happens to us around our desires, around pleasure, or certainly around sex. And so as soon as we just name that, okay, I feel a little embarrassed about this. I feel ashamed of it. In the book, I have a name the shame game, because recognizing that this is not your inner voice. This is certainly not deep wisdom coming from you. This could be a parent. This could be an authoritarian figure in your life, right? Maybe caught you when you were pleasuring yourself as a child. It could be the society, so just naming and recognizing the voice, that it's not from inside of you. This is something that's put on us. So then we can get it out and see what's there and play with the shame and be able to shed the shame so that we can open that channel of curiosity and erotic delight that will surprise us. So I think that it's really helpful to know that shame is totally normal in the bedroom, because that's kind of how it's been designed in the culture that we live in. And so to be able to don't feel like ashamed or feel bad that this is some baggage from childhood, just recognize we all have this and you can free yourself from it.
amen.
Glad you double clicked on that one. I remember my unpacking of shame. thanks to my counselor.
I think
That
we were in
was
our like second session and she asked him a question about masturbation and he just started
He's like, oh
crying.
shit, didn't see that one coming.
Nope, there it is. Yeah.
Found it. Yeah, that was a huge one awakening, and then two, just like a shedding.
Okay, so much good stuff. I know a lot of this is in your book. So I'm curious, Elana, what was inspiration? Because it sounds like this was a personal experiment you were doing to save your marriage. Might sound dramatic, but like really bring the marriage you wanted back to life. What then transitioned it from being this something you were doing for your personal relationship to I want to write a book and help others with this?
Yeah. It was maybe 6 months or so after we started the practice, and we had a fabulous sure thing. I'm getting out of the bed, and I just had the lightning strike. And I turned to Bill and said, honey, I think I'm going to have to write a book about this because I don't want to keep this to myself. I want to share this because other people have this issue too.
And when she said that, I was like, yeah, of course you do. Like, you absolutely have to write a book on this.
I love that. Sounds kind of divinely inspired.
Yeah, and who did you say the book is for?
I think it's for anyone who wants more access to pleasure in their life, whether they're single or in a couple, and whether it's been there before or they've never experienced really deep, fulfilling sensual satisfaction. So this is a roadmap. I like to see it's an interactive playbook. I call it a playbook because there's lots of prompts, there's lots of guided visualizations, there's lots of exercises, and it will take you by the hand and lovingly guide you to discover what it is will be reliably and ongoingly fulfilling for you. And it's a playbook so you can write in it and go back to it so that you can, okay, well, now that intention, I feel fulfilled with that intention and I want to create another intention. So then you go back and you create another intention and then have your sure thing then be set to satisfy that new intention. And so really, I mean, and it's certainly for those people who are in long-term relationships and are looking to revive the spark that they once had.
I love that phrase. Actually, I say we love that phrase, revive the spark. I've had to come around to that one because I'm like, I don't want to help bring the spark back. Like, that was my own personal journey. But I think that's what resonates with the most amount of people in lifelong marriage.
You use the fire analogy a lot. Like you have that early fire and then it can go down to just like embers, after
Yeah.
kids or responsibilities and work and
Gotta blow
everything. Yeah.
That's
He's probably going to make a blowjob joke here. Yeah.
Yeah, fan that flame. And you mentioned visualizations, and that was a gift that you had for the listeners. If they're curious about the book and want to get a bit of a flavor, tell us about the visualization.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to gift all of y'all. It's the journey to deepen with your wild sensual self. I mentioned Vivacious Viv. And so this is a guided journey to help and support you to connect with that part of yourself. And even if you haven't been in touch with this part for quite a while, it doesn't matter. Or even if you were in touch with this part early this morning, it still will guide you into a deepened connection with your wild sensual self. So you will get that. And you can also go to surethingexperiment.com, which is my website, and find out about the offerings that I'm doing, get a copy of the book, and just become part of the love experiment. Because really, we need more love. We need more pleasure at this moment with everything that's going on in the world. And I really believe that this is one of the practices. Having a weekly pleasure practice is what will have us be resilient, courageous, and kind. And we need more of that right now.
Absolutely.
And I get this sense, if I was listening to this podcast as myself and I saw that, I'd be like, cool, I'm going to grab that download and just like send it to Angela. And I'm probably going to just caution that. I would say do it yourself, man, woman, whatever you identify as, do it yourself and then be that change and let them feel the difference in you. And then when they go, what have you been doing? And be like, this is what it was. Would you like it? That might have a better impact. Would you agree with that, Elana?
Yes. Brilliant guidance, James. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've learned a few things.
Well, I absolutely love this. I love our conversation. I'm sad it's coming to an end. We will put those links, your free gift, thank you, Elana, as well as her website and how to get her book all in our show notes so you can find those. And
And use
I
them.
just I have trouble imagining any couple who wouldn't benefit from this, right? I mean, because I feel like even if you have
An awesome spark or a fire, like who
Yeah,
wouldn't want a bigger bonfire?
right, or you just want to keep it going, because it does it does take practice, and especially if you're in this for the long haul. I was joking earlier, you don't just stop going to the gym because you got strong, right? Like you have to keep going. And so I feel like intimacy is the same. We have to keep practicing it. We have to keep letting it evolve. So
Amen, sis.
everybody get a book.
As we hit the off ramp, we've got a couple of rapid fire questions we love to ask. Question 1, what do you two call each other?
What's your pet names?
Sugar.
Babe, honey.
Sugar Babe, honey. Yeah. It's
Babe.
funny. James, we usually call each other like honey. And if he actually says my name, if he says Angela, I'm like, what? Who is he talking to?
Awesome. Question 2, who makes the bed in the morning?
I make my side, he makes his side.
How many pillows do you have on the bed?
One from each of her.
Efficient.
We have decorative pillows that James loves.
Who's the first to apologize or repair after an argument?
Usually whoever should. I don't feel like, yeah, I mean, if whoever, so, no, I'm just kidding. Like, usually there's somebody, I don't feel like our fights really get very out of control. So usually somebody said something and they know that what they said was hurtful and the other person might call them on it. And that's usually pretty much where our fights stop. So it's usually the other person who apologizes.
Nice. And just for fun, what's your favorite snack?
Favorite snack? Oh my God, am I like going blank?
It's the hardest question at the interview.
Chocolate.
I guess, yeah, chocolate. And I also like to snack on
Ooh, apricots.
The dried ones?
dried apricots.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
Peanuts.
I'm kind of a sugar fiend,
Peanuts.
so anything that'll give me sugar, and dried apricots are a very good natural source of good
Yeah.
natural source.
Sugar.
I've taken
Your sugar.
to dates. Dates do the same thing. They're like super
They do. I
sugary, but
love
you
dates.
feel
Yeah,
better than eating ice cream. Yeah.
We try not to keep dates in the house too much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
we've all
mow
loved
through
it.
'em.
Well,
Yeah.
this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you for sharing your hearts. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, and your tools with this audience. If you've loved this show, please go ahead and leave it a review if you have not already. If this brought somebody to mind, perhaps your spouse, your lover, great
Best friend.
yeah, go ahead and share this episode with them and just say that I thought of you. That's how we get to share this love into the world and continue to grow our mission of bringing more love to the world, because that's what changes it, y'all. So thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Married and Magnetic. Until then, may your life and love be magnetic.